Suicide. Someone kills themselves in the world nearly every 43 seconds. About 750,000 people commit suicide annually. We don't make light of this. The causes of suicide are complex, difficult to rationalize, and indeed legion. Suicide does seem to overpresent in the orbit of Jeffrey Epstein. I explained who and what I thought Jeffrey Epstein was on our podcast show, Anchorman.
The effort to frustrate the Epstein release is largely driven by the very foreign governments who are involved in running Epstein. I think that we would have had this information long ago, and he'd probably still be alive today if Epstein wasn't working with at least one foreign government during the time of the Iraq War to keep leverage over key voices in academia and business and politics. And I think that the exposure of that operation would necessarily lead to some very uncomfortable moments for some other American allies.
Yeah, it would. We're supposed to believe that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. And magically, while killing himself, apparently, did he take out the video cameras as well? Because the video cameras in the federal courthouse where Epstein was being held were out just in time for this death to happen. There is no visual evidence of the manner of Jeffrey Epstein's death. We've now also been told that Epstein's most well-known victim, Virginia Giuffre, has also died by suicide. This struck us as odd. Ms. Giuffre is fresh off receiving $12 million from Prince Andrew following a legal settlement. People who just got $12 million they've long been fighting for in a judgment typically don't end their lives. Moreover, Virginia herself said she was not suicidal in a social media post. Moreover, Ms. Giuffre was the mother of 3. Mothers aren't immune from suicide, though men do commit suicide more often than women. She had divorced her allegedly abusive husband of 22 years. It seemed her life was to begin anew. $12 million, fresh off a divorce. She was eager to see her kids, but then she got hit by a bus. Following that event, Giuffre indicated that she wanted to see her kids following that accident, and she was not talking like someone who was looking to end it all. So did Jeffrey Epstein and his most well-known victim both commit suicide absent any video evidence? Or are more questions necessary to find out what really happened? Joining us now, Executive Director for the Foundation for Freedom Online, Mike Benz. I have to say, Mike, you are probably the favorite guest of every guest I have on this program. My audience just goes crazy when you come on and share your insights. And I wanted to get your perspective on the death of Virginia Giuffre. What do you think we need to know?
Well, it's a very strange case. She lived. She's a mother of 3, apparently, who lived in a fairly secluded part of Australia. Officials are saying that there's currently nothing suspicious about the death. She was involved in a bus accident where there appear to be conflicting reports about the severity of it days before her death. She appeared to say on social media that there was pretty major damage from it, whereas officials reported that the injuries were only minor. So it's kind of hard to pierce behind the veil of it. Certainly, she was one of the most high-profile witnesses and whistleblowers into the entire Jeffrey Epstein scandal. Famously, her involvement with Prince Andrew, allegedly, is part of what gave rise to that pretty amazing BBC interview. If folks remember a few years back, one of the craziest interviews I think a royal family member has ever participated in. Obviously, sweeps up in the web the whole UK side of the Epstein scandal. This is also, I should note, happening just within days of the mysterious death of Carol Howe, who was one of the most significant witnesses to the federal foreknowledge of the events of the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995. Carol Howe just died in a house fire, and there's very little details around that have come forward other than, Carol Howe was the woman who was working for the ATF with an FBI handler who had warned the FBI months in advance. She had penetrated the Elohim City white supremacist compound and told her federal handlers every aspect of the operation before it happened. That, of course, set up the domestic surveillance state that we now live under. It was Joe Biden who sponsored the domestic spying, the FBI wireless, warrantless wiretapping program in the 1996 counterterrorism law that had failed to get passed in 1994, but was only passed because of the OKC bombing. You also have, of course, in the Jeffrey Epstein scandal, the same run here. You have Stanley Pottinger, who was a high-profile sort of CIA super spy type, who had appears to have played a very significant role in the defense of the Epstein witnesses, including Virginia herself, and he happens to have a very strange involvement with the granting of domestic surveillance powers to the CIA after the Orlando Letelier incident decades back. And so you have this sort of too big to fail aspect of the Epstein investigation. And as we are now revisiting under the intelligence purview declassifications, what may have happened in the hidden history of this country, and everything from OKC to 9/11 to Jeffrey Epstein, as various members of the cabinet have all announced, suddenly key whistleblowers are dropping like flies.
I have posited the theory, informed by my own review of the facts, that Jeffrey Epstein was an asset of foreign intelligence. And if that's true, how would the countries that ran Epstein think about someone like Virginia Giuffre?
Well, it would obviously represent a pretty significant danger to the extent that her testimony is credible. We saw this happening in the Epstein case. In the JFK files. You saw folks from Australia, actually, I think it was the Australian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, petitioning to keep things confidential. Certainly when it comes to Epstein, you have everything from Israel to Saudi Arabia to the UK. What you have here is this meta issue around intelligence sharing and shared assets when you have a transatlantic or a multinational alliance on a particular intelligence project, a particular initiative, and you will have intelligence sharing, as we have with France, for example, in U.S.-France operations in Africa, as we have with Israel, for example, in affairs ranging from the Middle East to South America, as we have with Saudi Arabia and the UK. And obviously, to the extent that there is intelligence sharing and shared assets who report to handlers on both fronts, or who report to a handler in one country, and that evidence or testimony or intelligence is shared with other partners, that obviously implicates those other partners, and they would want to lobby and petition that government not to declassify that information. And that is part of what may make this whole Epstein affair too big to fail. My personal read on this, having spoken to folks in Washington, is that not a lot of people want to touch it. And if I can make one more point on this, is we have two competing tracks of reforms that are happening right now, which is the redress of the immediate abuses of the past several years in terms of domestic targeting from the FBI, from the CIA, from USAID, from the Pentagon, from the IC writ large. And those are immediate and actionable, and they draw down political capital. My concern is, I think, chasing the whole enchilada, so to speak, by trying to get transparency about something as big as the Epstein network is my sense of it right now. I was optimistic, initially when I saw when cash got in, and when it looked like we were getting a lot of reforms at USAID. And I think even when the JFK files came out unredacted, even though those were not necessarily flattering to the intelligence community or to international partners, I was optimistic about 2 months ago. My optimism on the Epstein reveals, after speaking to some folks in D.C., is a little bit less now.
Yeah, and presumably that's because when just for the audience's sake, when Mike is saying too big to fail, what he's really saying is there's a massive international intelligence sharing regime. And if the truth about Jeffrey Epstein, his victims, his recruitment, his compromise operation were revealed, then you could have some of those existing partners cleave off, stop working with the United States, and the harm could be substantial going forward. And so you have people weighing the need for transparency against the potential risk of those entities leaving and not being engaged in that type of intelligence sharing. Is that the core of too big to fail to you, Mike?
Yes, it is. And there's lots of ways that, in addition to jeopardizing the relationship, there could be retaliations. This also plays into everything else happening at the international layer right now around tariffs and trade policy and the renegotiation of security alliances right now around the change in foreign policy vis-a-vis seeking peace with Russia as opposed to the infinite war. And so there are a lot of these international alliances being redrawn, and in the thick of that, to potentially publish information that might jeopardize, humiliate, or cause scandals within those countries. Because the same way we have a deep state here and we've close elections here, other countries have the same that they're going through. And to the extent that high-profile political figures or administrations have participated in cover-ups with respect to aspects of the Epstein affair in their countries, that could play into this as well. And so I think that there's right now, as the Epstein portfolio is being inherited by the Justice Department and is being reopened by aspects of the IC just to get a handle on what everything is, I think that the coterie of handlers, donors, lobbyists are sort of making their voices known to say, don't go there. We need to talk about this. Not yet. And that is my sense of where things stand right now. I don't expect anything soon.
Mike Benz from the Foundation for Freedom Online, thank you as always for coming on the program and sharing your insights.
Thanks, Matt.